Excellent. All right. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming to discuss GPI 2.0. This is an upgrade to the Gemini Planet Imager. GPI, as in the past, is accumulating a lot of authors that it has accumulated before. With a vast number of these, I think almost 50% of the people who are on this list actually being new students who have since joined the project. So let's see, there we go. So a little bit of recap of what was GPI 1.0. So GPI 1.0 was delivered to Gemini South in 2013 and underwent science operations, was part of the general queue from 2014B to 2022A. Of the accepted proposals, there were 58 different unique principal investigators with about 1,700 hours of total queue time between all of them, split very close to 50-50 between the large-scale survey and the LLPs, the standard proposal calls, director's discretionary time, and fast turnaround. This resulted in 78 referee publications, which were cited approximately 300, I guess it's not an approximate number, 3,287 times. And I want to point out that those are just the refereed science publications. If you include the instrument publications, GPI has had a large influence on the instrument community and is used widely for its instrument papers. That gets up to about 5,100. It has an instrument H-index of 33 of science papers and 39 of instrument plus science papers. The science data resulted in 14 unique PhDs during its tenure from 2014 to 2020, and it was delivered with a robust IDL data reduction pipeline. It produced a number of important scientific results, including some important movies that get shown a number of times. It was able to look and understand the atmosphere of Beta Pictoris b and also chart its movement and make predictions if it would occult or not occult its star. It discovered the lowest mass Jupiter-sized planet, 51 Eri b. It discovered a number of different brown dwarfs that we were able to get spectra of. And it had a wide variety of different debris disks and was able to make interpretations and understanding of our debris disk structure. The Gemini Planet Imager Exoplanet Survey was focused on understanding the demographics of planet formation, not necessarily on discovering planets, but on understanding where we sit in the universe. As a result, we found out that planets are relatively rare and had a very strong, or it found a very good detection range for hot start planets, but it was a little bit lacking in the number of stars that it was able to survey to understand the parameters for cold start planets. And these are different planet formation scenarios. And so GPI was being considered to move from Gemini South to Gemini North. And at the same time, the GPI team decided in 2018 to go out and discuss with the scientific community and bring the science community in for a meeting to discuss what proposals or what requirements GPI would need to both meet their next generation science and their sort of wish list or their goals of science. And out of that two-day meeting resulted a number of different science cases, including different requirements to push on the instrument. These were formed around a couple of different ideas, including not competing with existing instruments that are on the summit, but being complementary, and also pushing the science in a realistic way that could be met. So what we did is the teams went out, found the scientific community. The scientific community reported on essentially the requirements here, and these were turned into technical requirements for upgrading the instrument. These were backed by a couple of different simulations and surveys and resulted in two major pushes in science direction, and then some auxiliary science. The two major pushes are for the detection of both hot and cold start planets. And so what you're seeing here on the left is in gray are the existing contrast curves. This is the brightness that GPI was able to essentially dig down in its dark holes around existing stars, simulated against a model universe with both hot and cold start planets matching the statistics that GPI found. In dark black is an improved contrast curve of 3.2 magnitudes that we estimate that GPI would be able to achieve if it was upgraded and are written around the goals. And so you can see the number of planets that are circled that weren't detected by GPI that would be available to be observed. On the right is the same simulation of a universe, but now with a survey of stars running from 0 to 1,000 stars, correlated with different contrasts and magnitudes, leading to some of the goals of pushing GPI's magnitude down to discover cold start planets. I don't know what happened there. Okay. The other option, or the other goal, was to look at very young planets around Taurus. This is pushing GPI's limit. GPI traditionally only worked out to about 100 parsecs before the inner working angle became unmanageable, and the stars around these very young moving groups are extremely faint due to their distance, or it's extremely faint for GPI. And so this pushed the inner working angle and the brightness magnitudes of GPI, but it would allow us to reach some of the absolute youngest planets. The third additional science case area that GPI wanted to look into was the asteroids and solar system objects groups wanted to get down to about 14th magnitude. This would open up approximately 1,300 objects that would be available for GPI to study. There's been a growing interest in looking at planet variability. And in fact, we've had some interest from GPI using its wide field, but relatively wide wavelength range, but relatively wide wavelength range, but narrow field of view, sorry, to look at AGN. So expanding GPI's capabilities outside of the exoplanet and solar system regime. What this results in is, this is GPI as it is today. So this is GPI 1.0. And everything in green that you see here are updates and modifications that we're making to the system. These updates and modifications are intended to improve operations of GPI, and they're also intended to improve the efficiency of the instrument. Oops. Here we go. So the first of those upgrades is an upgrade to the adaptive optics system. GPI was built with a standard Shack-Hartmann wavefront sensor. It was a spatially filtered Shack-Hartmann wavefront sensor, but we are upgrading to a pyramid with an EMCCD. These were, this was designed by HAA. It was simulated by both HAA and Stanford and is being built at the University of California, San Diego. It replaces, as I mentioned, our Shack-Hartmann wavefront sensor. It's based upon the nefarious TMT, and in fact, it's an identical prism to those. It unfortunately has to fit into a relatively narrow space envelope under the existing footprint, mass, and size of GPI. So it is very space constrained, and it will be updating or moving the upgrade rate of GPI from 1 kilohertz to 2 kilohertz. Additionally, we've been pushing down the latency to improve operations. As you can see here on the right, a number of the components have been acquired and assembled. The one component we're waiting on is what is one of our more hopeful ones, which is an EMCCD with an extremely low latency. And on the bottom, you can see both the assembled part, and the students at San Diego have decided that it looks like the Millennium Falcon, so they bought a little tiny Han Solo to travel with the AO system. As I mentioned, our goal was to push GPI's operations to at least 13th magnitude with gentle degradation through 14th magnitude. And so these are simulations of the pyramid AO system on GPI against essentially multiple brightnesses of stars and multiple different seeing conditions. And what we find is that GPI should reach its goal with margin for error to be able to operate down to 14th magnitude and may get to 15th magnitude in the simulations. Along with upgrading the AO system, we're upgrading the coronagraphs. In fact, the physical coronagraphs themselves are staying the same, but the focal plane masks are being upgraded. So we're putting in new pupil masks and new LEO masks. This is leveraging design work that has been going on for the last 10 years for space-based missions. That started off with some of the GPI technical development. They've moved on to space-based designs, pushing the coronagraph designs even further, but we are now essentially redeploying them inside GPI. They're designed to reach deeper contrast at smaller separations, and so far the masks are being designed by Space Telescope Science Institute and are being manufactured by Lambda Consulting. These are essentially grown nano tubes. What you can see here on the bottom left are 3 different designs that we have. If you notice, If you know GPI's existing designs, these are quite a bit different. And what their goal is not only to achieve a deeper inner working, deeper contrast, but also by sacrificing some of the outer working angles, especially some of the contrast outside of GPI's capabilities or operations. One of the interesting things that we found is that we're actually able to improve throughput substantially by having essentially tighter alignment tolerances. Because GPI has been operating for the last decade, we've been able to find that it has it is able to maintain an alignment much tighter than what the original designs were for. And so we are now building around that knowledge of GPI's decade-long information. We're also upgrading the integral field spectrograph for GPI with a low resolution prism and more even resolutions between the existing high resolution prisms. That will enable it to do Y, J, and H band at about the same capabilities with slightly higher resolution in Y and J and a tiny bit lower in H. It will be able to do K band simultaneously. And then what is interesting for a survey mode is it will be able to do broadband all the way from 1 to 2.4 microns at the impressive resolution of 11.8. All in one single shot, though. So we will get all those simultaneously by being an integral field spectrograph. And in fact, it's not in this slide, but those prisms arrived today via FedEx. One of the other important components of GPI is upgrading the software to improve reliability and reduce the number of steps for Gemini to use it in queue operations. As you can see here on the left, this is a checklist in order to operate GPI on a single target. And it's a little disingenuous to say that it has 27 steps in it, since a number of the steps are wait for certain things to occur or to ask the SOS to do an acquisition. And several of the bottom steps are just for data monitoring that we underwent. But the idea is that GPI is multiple instruments in one. It's an AO instrument, it's a CAL, and it's an integral field spectrograph. And so by being complicated, we have the ability, and we've learned over the last decade of where the complications are. And our goal is to simplify the operations to get it closer to a single button operation. This includes translating the high-level control library to Python and improving queue operations and to improve time domain science. The current status of GPI is it is preparing to ship from Gemini South. Or did prepare to ship from Gemini South. It went down the mountain, it traveled up north, it arrived at Notre Dame, it was unloaded, and it is now safe and sound in the lab. GPI arrived at Notre Dame in June of 2020. It's undergoing a complimentary set of pre-ship tests that were done last year to confirm that its state, and then to essentially confirm its arrival state. These are the same tests that were actually performed when GPI was originally shipped from North America to Gemini South. GPI is approximately 24 months behind schedule, and the goal is to ship it to Gemini North by the end of 2023 to early 2024. Upgrades to GPI will enable it to study fainter stars for closer exoplanet populations. Its new adaptive optics will hopefully be capable of locking onto stars 4 magnitudes fainter. The upgrades should allow us to find lower mass planets closer to their parent star than the current system. It will be able to obtain full spectra across the entire near-infrared band simultaneously. And as I mentioned, the goal is to be available for science by late 2024 to the general community. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions.
All right, do we have any questions? Maybe we can start on Slack if there are any questions there.
There are none.
No, none yet.
Actually, I have a question. Do you have an expected number of planets you can image with GPI2 compared? Like, is there a number of more planets that you can? What's the upgrade for GPI2 going to give us compared to GPI1 in terms of number of planets we can image?
Yeah, so there's two, let's see here. I can't remember if I have this in my spare deck set or not. So there's two different ways of looking at this. I don't have that in my spare. So there's the first one, which is the slide I gave earlier, which is right now we have one object that is maybe a cold start planet or maybe a hot start planet. And so if you assume that it's a hot start planet, then we would add 4 to 5 cold start planets. And this is using a blind survey. So essentially trying to understand, again, the statistics and not taking into account current planet finding, or sorry, not solely searching for planets, but actually searching for the statistical properties of planets. There's a number of hot start planets that I do have that I can't, but you might be able to sort of eyeball it based upon this figure. We do have simulations for different number of stars and different number of surveys. What is another interesting case is that there are a number of groups who are looking at accelerations from Gaia and Hipparchus and taking in essentially data from other areas of astronomy to do informed surveys. Now, this breaks your ability to do an unbiased sample by biasing your sample, but will add planets in. And so we expect GPI will find a number of other planets. And again, I don't have the number off the top of my head, it's, but you can sort of guess it based upon that figure that's there, the number of planets that essentially we will add to the list of directly imaged planets.
And then we do have a question from Jonathan Williams on Slack. Will the data reduction still be in IDL, or is there work to upgrade that too?
Yeah, so there was originally a discussion within the team if we wanted to leave everything in IDL or if we wanted to upgrade it to Python. So the IDL package that does the data reduction for GPI just does essentially the core pieces. So it allows you to convert from 2D information to 3D information. That core code hasn't been updated in many, many years. And while we're going to have to make a modification for the new filters, it was decided that right now, a number of people interact with that code through Python. That code will actually accept commands from Python. If you put things into the correct directory, all it is looking for is a config file, and then it immediately executes on that. Since that was written in IDL, it was written to be essentially standalone, being that you do not have to have an IDL license to execute it. You just have to point it at the correct folder. It was decided by the GPI team that as we were looking at different things and we were trying to most effectively use the money that we had, or to search for money in the most effective way, there were more important science questions than just translating the pipeline from IDL to Python, when right now the GPI team and other members of the community use Python to write the scripts. The IDL code runs on its own, especially in the compiled version, and then it spits out frames which are then promptly picked up by Python.
So, are there any more? Okay, well, I have a quick question. Maybe we can get the slides for the next speaker ready as well. Well, I'll just ask quickly. I was wondering, on your slide about the statistics of how many planets you're going to find, how sensitive is that assumption to that, your assumptions about like the relative percentage of hot start versus cold start planets?
So I will say that the, I wish I had the hot start one, but I will say that the prediction for hot start is a little bit more, we updated this using the GPI statistics that were available at the time, or the current statistics from the GPI survey about the number of planets. So I will say the hot start ones are well grounded, or at least are grounded in those statistics. The cold start ones are a shot in the dark. If there are no cold start planets that exist, then we won't find anything. If cold start planets are more plentiful than the existing hot start planets, then we would find substantially more cold start planets. So it's a little bit, since there aren't any known cold start planets, unless you count 51 Aries 1, and it's on the maybe line, we don't know how over predictive or under predictive we are, though I think no matter what we find, if you find 4 as we predict, or if you found many more, you found many fewer, that would have a big influence upon our understanding of planetary system formation.